Welcome. My name is Kim Humphrey, and I am here with Ron Patrick. I'll introduce him a little more in just a second at PAL in Phoenix, Arizona. And I am the executive director here at PAL, and I really appreciate you tuning in today to talk about a very important subject. First of all, we'd love to know who's tuning in and where you're from. So if you have a minute and you can go on Facebook there and let us know where you're at, that you're tuning in, that would be great. You're also welcome to participate in today's broadcast by submitting any questions. We will certainly try to get to as many of them as we can. And again, our topic today is really dealing with all of the stress that's going on out there. Associated with everything from this coronavirus outbreak to the layer of complexity that it adds when you have an addicted loved one, and all the other things that are happening around our country. Just a couple of other little things. If you want to be notified of our videos and or Facebook Live events, make sure that you follow us on Facebook. Make sure that you turn on your notifications on your phone and on your computer, and then you'll receive automatic updates when we send those out. Also, although we are certainly going to be talking about our personal opinions today on this issue, these do not necessarily reflect the organization of PAL as a whole. Ron, who is sitting here with me, a good friend, is a licensed independent substance abuse therapist. He also specializes in individual couples and working with adolescents, providing counseling, and he has a private practice here in Phoenix. You may also recognize his name from our newsletter that comes out every month, and every other month Ron provides a blog in our newsletter, so you may want to check those out as well, which are all archived on our website.
That's true.
So thanks, Ron, so much for joining us today. And you know, I was thinking about this topic, and in reality, we're dealing with a lot of things. I mean, we're not just, parents with addicted loved ones are already have mountains of stress associated with all of this. And then you turn around and you have, this issue with this virus, which is not only the health scare that's going on, which is, a big concern to all of us, but it's affecting our everyday lives. I mean, everything from our bank, our retirement accounts are being affected by this, to problems at stores with getting supplies and all of that type of thing. And it just seems like there's just so much happening. And now they're actually causing us at PAL to close down many of our meetings temporarily because the facilities are not allowing us to meet in those facilities based on the number of people, and of course just trying to control this issue. So maybe you could just start off and talk for just a minute about, hey, when everything starts crashing in like this, what's important to start thinking about?
What's important to start thinking about? Well, we could go a lot of different directions with that. I think what's really important is to prioritize in your mind. Begin to prioritize what's important. What do I absolutely need to focus on? What do I have some control over with all of this shifting landscape? And what are things that I really don't, they're not an absolute must, they're not a necessity, and that I need to, for now at least temporarily, just let go of. That right there will relieve a lot of stress. So scaling back expectations, focusing on a few things that are really important, whether it's getting groceries in the home, staying in contact with family members, that type of thing. Finding ways to get your work done during the work week, even though your kids are at home and you're sequestered in your house with a computer and trying to get your work done. But, just understanding that things obviously are not going to be the way you would like them to be. And if you're constantly fighting against that, you're just creating more stress for yourself.
Well, I just personally, I'm watching all of this unfold, and just on a real simple thing, I have elderly parents, and they're not in this state, and so I'm very concerned about them, and so I'm I hate to say obsessing, but I'm constantly trying to check on them and make sure everything's okay, and then in the meantime I'm literally watching the what's happening to the stock market and the financial aspect of it, and I retired just recently, and now that's my retirement fund, and it's hard. It's hard to watch all this stuff and just sit there and go, well, how am I going to deal with this? What am I going to do? So those are practical issues that are affecting us, and I guess I'm just looking for how do I deal with that?
So again, I think, Kim, whether it's your situation or mine or whoever's listening today, it gets back to what are things that I have direct control over, and really focusing my energy and my intentions onto those areas, and understanding some things like the stock market and your retirement account, even though that's obviously really worrisome to watch that happening. At the end of the day, you have no control over it. And at some point, you have to literally kind of walk away from it. Just, you know what, that's something, if I obsess on that, that's just going to constantly ruin my day and create incredible amounts of stress. The other thing, too, is when we're in these kinds of situations, it's really important to take an inventory of what we do have. We get very focused on what we don't have and what we might lose next. And one of my favorite phrases is "don't borrow trouble." We already have enough trouble. Don't go borrowing extra trouble, additional trouble. So focusing on what we do have, cultivating a real attitude of gratitude, which helps give us perspective. Which right now perspective is really important. Those things all help to offset. It's not that you're going to eliminate these stressors. They're real, they're there, but we have to have a way to offset them and find a way to shift focus, or otherwise the scale just constantly tips in a negative direction.
And so I just brought up a couple of things that are external issues that are happening in my life that are outside of the issue of dealing with an addicted loved one.
Right.
And that just in and of itself is already, can be an extraordinarily stressful situation. And now that people are not having the opportunity maybe to be able to go to meetings and things like that, it's even making it more difficult for people. So when it comes down to dealing again with your loved ones, maybe just a recap of, what should we be doing in times like this when now we're worried not only about their addiction, but now we're worried that they may get, sick as well with something like this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's obviously really complicated. I think we're all kind of sorting through that and trying to figure out what's the best course of action. What I would say, generally speaking, is to not throw out all your hard-earned work in creating boundaries and creating a path for yourself that is healthy and leading towards healing in your life, to not throw that all overboard in a impulsive way. I would say whatever boundaries you have set with your addictive loved one, you need to maintain those. There could be obviously exceptions to that rule, but again, the point is not to panic and suddenly throw plan A out the window and adopt a plan B that you haven't really thought through well and could be really driven by a lot of fear. And when we start making decisions out of fear, nothing good comes from that. So if anything, I would encourage people to take a step back, take a deep breath, and really prayerfully think through and solicit advice from people that they trust as far as making any changes to how they approach their addicted loved one.
So one of the PAL lessons that we have, it's a supplemental lesson, and the title of the lesson is Respond Rather Than React.
Right.
And clearly we're looking for a response which is usually more thoughtful, takes some time, whereas reactions can be very emotional, and right now I mean, it's easy to make a quick emotional reaction to things that are happening.
Right now, absolutely. Yeah. And that's what you don't want to do. And that's what I'm saying. Take a step back, take a deep breath. The boundaries you put in place, you've put there for a good reason, and more than likely they're solid and need to stay in place. Again, there may be exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, I would say you don't make changes there.
So as you look at this and the situation and how it's unfolding, and the fact is literally every day we're hearing something new. There's new changes to our our lifestyle. They're changing what we can and cannot or should and should not do,
Right.
And things like that. And so part of it is I want to be informed and I want to know what I'm supposed to do, but I also find myself wanting to just literally go on the news every 5 seconds and find out what's happening.
Yeah, what's new?
Yeah.
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 Again, I think that's just human nature when we're in kind of a crisis mode, is wanting to have the latest information, and we feel like we just can't get enough information. But there is a point where I think we have to each recognize that too much is too much, and that there's, again, a certain point where, I have enough basic information to help me understand how to best navigate through today, and anything beyond that is excessive and probably not doing me a lot of good. And that's where we need to then turn the TV off, put our phones down and get away from the latest news updates, and focus on, again, whether it's the work we need to get done or the groceries we need to secure or the time we need to spend with our wife or our kids, or connecting with our friends. Really turn our attention to something that's a little more productive and life-giving. So.
Well, and one of our unfortunate issues that many of us deal with that have addicted loved ones is this issue of codependency.
Yes.
And it seems like when there's something going on like this, that aspect just wants to kick right in, which is, I've got to go out and solve everything, help everybody, and forget about myself.
Yeah. Under stress, we tend to go, I call it hitting our default setting, and we tend to slide into our default setting. So if we are by nature codependent and have lived our lives quite some time that way, and we're just now starting to break free of that and live a different way, you have to be very aware that, man, that's going to be your impulse. That's going to be your first thought, your first response, is I need to go find my kid out on the street and protect him from this virus. Or rescue. And again, being able to step back and think that through a lot more clearly is really, really important. Because again, most of the time when we react out of that kind of impulse, as well-meaning as it is, okay, and we can certainly mask it as loving, and sometimes it is, it's not really very wise, and usually ends up setting everybody back, yourself as well as your addicted loved one. So you might buy some temporary gains where you feel a little less guilty or you feel a little more in control, but then you're going to end up kind of sowing the seeds of some real problems down the road.
Well, and in reality, as I thought about, my wife and I's situation with our sons, I go back, to when they were really deep in their addiction. And, my son, who knows that, for example, sharing a needle or anything like that could be fatal. I mean,
Right.
You could have potential diseases from all of that.
Yep.
He didn't care.
Yep.
I go back to the fact that, my son was in the hospital at one point. He was potentially going to lose his arm over an abscess in it, and they had him on antibiotics, and they said, he has to be on this. And before I even got to the hospital, he had pulled out the IV and ran out the door.
Yeah.
And so what I'm concerned is that I think we may think we can go and pull them out of wherever they are at or whatever they're doing and somehow protect them.
Right.
But in reality, what are we dealing with?
Again, if they're deep into their addiction, you're fooling yourself because they are not going to think and respond rationally. And you may have a temporary gain. You may achieve something temporarily in an immediate way, but it won't last. And you're building on a foundation, whether it's codependency or fear or whatever, that again at some point will crack and collapse. So all of those impulses as a parent are very normal. I mean, none of my children are in any kind of active addiction, but as a parent, I'm very concerned about my kids and their welfare. I've contacted every one of them multiple times, and they've contacted me because they like to remind me that I'm in the high risk category because I'm old. And man, I've never heard my kids tell me I'm old so much as the last 3 or 4 days. And I'm like, okay, I got it. I got it. I'm old. I'm in the high risk category. But the point is, it's normal to worry, to be concerned, to reach out. You talk about measures you can take. You ask them, what measures they're taking. And then you have to let it go and trust that they're going to make their own decisions. So even in healthy situations, there's going to be that impulse as a parent to want to somehow protect and insulate our kids from all of this. And that's just not reasonable. More so unreasonable with your addicted children. The idea that we can rescue them in this is, a mistake.
Well, in our PAL meetings, I have a phrase I like to use sometimes when people say, they're in some sort of crisis. And of course, now we've got a crisis all around us. But
Right.
people will bring up and they'll say, oh, they just called me and they're in this crisis or whatever. And my phrase is that this is a test of the emergency crisis response system. And
I love it. That's perfect.
well, and I think about it as a way to remind ourselves that how are we going to respond in that crisis?
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe recapping again, what are things to do when your mind starts unraveling over this whole thing, like, oh my gosh, they're out there now, they're going to get this on top of everything else, and can they even get tested, and how are they going to, they're going to kick them out of the hospital because they're on drugs and they're on other I mean, I could start thinking of all kinds of crazy thoughts that will go through my brain,
Mm-hmm.
if I start thinking that way.
Absolutely. I could come at that a lot of different directions, but at the end of the day, again, we have to find it within ourselves to take a big step back, take a big deep breath, think it through, pray it through, and most importantly, connect through with people that we really trust to give us good, solid feedback, good input that allow us to calm and make decisions from a better place than that sheer fear, panic, and I need to do something now kind of response. So one thing that I go over with clients when we talk about life struggles is that there's 5 ways to respond to a struggle. And if you don't mind, I'm going to read them right now. Hopefully everybody will be okay with that. The first way that we can respond to a struggle is either irrationally or impulsively. And we've even seen that in our society across the country with this irrational and impulsive need to stockpile toilet paper, just as an example. And there's lots of other ways things that we can point to as far as irrational responses, impulsive responses. And again, certainly with our addicted loved ones, when we view them as kind of helpless or needy, they can't manage their life on their own, all the more impulse towards wanting to step in and manage life for them and manage the crisis for them. Again, but that's not good, that well-advised action. Another response, a second response to life struggle is we can react resentfully. We can just get angry at everybody and everything and start lashing out or start making, again, decisions out of this place of anger and deep frustration. And again, that is not going to produce anything helpful in a time of crisis. The third one is we can react passively. So when we're angry, a lot of times we'll react very aggressively. I'm going to attack this situation. I'm going to take control, and I'm going to power my way through this. And then the other response is to react very passively, as though you have no power, you're helpless, you're a victim, poor me, and you just kind of curl up in a ball and take no action whatsoever. Fourth response is we can respond courageously and with faith. And obviously that's where I would encourage all of us to begin to land. It takes a while to get there. I got to tell you, when this all started, I had a real deep, angry reaction to all of it because I saw a lot of impulsive and irrational decisions being made. And I was like, man, I'm mad about this. But I've had to accept that I have no control over the direction things are going, and to begin to adjust to this reality and begin to respond with courage and with faith. And then the last one is we can rebound creatively. Then we can begin to think creatively on how to help our addicted loved ones, how to help each other in supporting one another through this time of crisis and stress. So, again, as my encouragement to everyone today is, it's understandable that we can kind of work our way through these and experience some irrational thinking and impulsive actions. We can experience and expect to experience resentment, anger. We can also have those moments of feeling very almost passive, helpless, like, well, nothing I can do here, and taking no action whatsoever and becoming very fatalistic, which that's not a healthy approach. But hopefully as we work our way through that, we begin to land on courage and faith and creativity.
Well, it's always difficult when you're really dealing with a lot of stress and you're trying to find ways to handle it. And I know personally that at one point in my life I experienced it so much that I fell into a very depressive state. And we throw the word depression around a lot, and of course when we're really talking about real depression,
Clinical depression,
that's very different. And maybe if you could talk briefly about the warning signs of, oh my gosh, I'm getting too far, and you may need some more help here.
I think that when, again, people are different, and there can be a real difference between how men express and kind of show depression versus women. But certainly when we begin to withdraw and isolate, that's a big indicator that something's not okay. Certainly when we find our emotions just driving us up and down and all around, that's an indicator that we're losing control of just that basic process of being able to regulate these emotions. We're going to have these extreme emotional moments, but are we able to reel ourselves in? And when we find ourselves unable to do that and sinking deeper into our anger or our despair, that's usually an indicator that there's more at work here. We can, talking about default setting, if we start catching ourselves going into some of our unhealthy default settings, whether it's we begin drinking too much or we begin spending way too much time on the internet, those kinds of things, looking for a way to just kind of escape, again, combined with isolation, those are all real big indicators of growing problems beyond just the normal, worries or concerns that we all would have.
And that's a time to get in to see a doctor, see a counselor, see somebody to get this under control before it gets
Absolutely.
worse.
That's a time where you sit down and talk to your loved one and say, hey, I've been noticing this trend, this pattern, and I'm worried for you. And that's a time to reach out to, a therapist or your doctor or to a clergy member or, again, to even a good friend and say, I'm not sure I'm doing well, and I need to talk about this with you. Would you be willing to talk to me, listen to me? So, yeah, absolutely.
So we had a couple of questions come in, and maybe we could just cover those and then
Sure.
go into a little bit of a wrap up here in just a little bit. But the first question that had already come in before we started today was regarding quarantine for a homeless loved one. And the question was, which I'm not sure we can answer this, but the question was, would they be able to receive testing if they have SMI status, or they have mental illness issue going on,
Mm-hmm.
and they're on the street, and of course, they don't really have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
So, any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not up to speed on what the community agencies' policies are right now and how they're going about attacking this problem and providing services, but I would imagine for the most part, services are being extended on a fairly regular level. There's always this big issue right now of uncertainty of the availability of test kits and prioritizing who gets tested and who doesn't, if you're in a high-risk population or not. So there's a lot that I really can't speak to there, but I would say if you're concerned at all, one thing that does help is to educate yourself. So calling the agencies in your community and finding out what their policies are, what they're doing to accommodate this situation, at least that begins to give you some idea of what's going on out on the street. And that would be a starting point.
And another question that came in was, they stated, my husband is still going out to get his alcohol, and this scares me because I don't want him to bring something home to our family.
Mm.
So again, it's the same issue of, having to deal with somebody that's got this addiction issue apparently, but then the fear.
Yep. Well, this kind of speaks to an underlying issue that I think is really, really important at this point in time. Originally, our conversation, if I understood it, was going to be on husbands and wives working on the same page together. Mm-hmm. And that all changed with the virus outbreak and kind of the new concerns everybody has. But another way to alleviate stress in your home and in your life is, as a couple, really agreeing on what is acceptable risk and what is not. We're all going to have to take some risks. Today, I got up early so that I could be one of the old people that went shopping at Target during that designated hour. I don't know if you knew that or not, but there's a designated hour for you and I.
I don't think I fit that criteria.
Oh, I
I'm not
do.
sure.
I think you do. I could be wrong. We could ask.
So
ask
I might
your
see
wife.
you at Target.
Yeah. Anyway, got to go out and get some groceries. So is there a risk? Yeah, of course. But you take the precautionary measures. But the point is, getting back to, as husband and wife, as leaders in your home, as much as possible, talking these things over, agreeing on what is acceptable and what is not, having a strategy in place, that tends to calm the waters and allows for less stress when we're in a place of some understanding, some agreement. Situations like this, where you're not on the same page, obviously that does cause stress, that creates incredible friction, and really can create a divide in the home when we're needing to be united right now. But then we get back to what can you control and what can't you.
Right.
And understanding where you can make some changes and where you can't.
And that's going to be up to you.
And
if you're going to
that's
set a boundary there or if you're not.
that's up to the individual. So if this wife wants to set a boundary and say, as long as this virus crisis is in play, you can't be doing this. If you're going to be leaving the house, you're going to have to stay out of the house. That would be an example of a boundary. But that's very much up to the individual. And not knowing any of the particulars of this situation and how long it's been going on, it'd be hard to give more specific advice on that.
Well, and it really is an issue that transcends this particular time,
Right.
and all of that.
It does,
And
yeah.
we had another question that involved their son stealing from them, and they were, again, they're not necessarily on the same page, and they're talking about the fact that, should they press charges and things like that. And although this isn't really on the topic, what we ended up
Right.
doing today, it really is back to the same topic of boundaries and what's okay and what's not okay, and accountability for actions.
Yeah. Well, and this is, again, a good example, again, of where addiction or any other major crisis in our lives can create this huge divide between a husband and a wife, a father and a mother, kids and their parents. And this is where it's very important to be able to reach out and get good education and understand what addiction is about and how to help and what things are needed, such as accountability and consequences. Consequences are the best teacher, people. We're always talking about this, and it's so basic and so true, but yet it's sometimes the most difficult thing as a parent to implement. But that's where, again, the PAL group becomes so important, because you then have that interaction with other couples that have gone through this, that have worked their way through these divisions and divides in their approach and strategy. So reaching out and getting good independent counsel can be really helpful in breaking that logjam between the husband and the wife. So that's what I would advise there.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we are doing at PAL. I'll give you a minute to think about some closing thoughts,
Sure.
and then I'll have a couple after that. But at PAL, obviously, most of you know we've been affected by this as well. Many of the churches that we hold our meetings at have announced that they're closed temporarily and are not allowing any meetings to take place. We have some meetings that are still able to take place. They're small gatherings. They meet the criteria of under 10 individuals, and so some are still out there taking place. We encourage you to check the website. We've encouraged all of our facilitators to update the website. When you go to find a meeting, find your meeting, and then there's a meeting announcements section, and that's where we've asked them to put updates in there. The other thing we've passed along to all of our facilitators is the ability to hold virtual meetings, and there are several options for them. Some may or may not be able to do that, but if they are going to do that, that's where that will be announced, in that meeting announcements under Find a Meeting. We are certainly encouraging that. We're hoping that our facilitators will continue to make themselves available, but we also understand that they're dealing with this as well.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot that everybody is having to deal with. But at this time, it's just an amazing group of volunteers that we have out there. They're doing a phenomenal job, and we have just heard from many of them that are just making personal phone calls, making themselves available, and others that have other issues going on are doing the best they can. And we just appreciate everybody that is doing what they can throughout all of this, and we're all hoping and praying that this is not going to continue for too long, so that hopefully we can get over this, that hopefully we can do a good job of keeping this from affecting so many people, which is our greatest fear. And so I'm really hoping that our facilitators will take advantage of that. And in addition, if your facilitator is not providing a virtual meeting, we do offer virtual meetings. In the past, we had offered them consistently. We have, and we still do on Mondays. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
We've had those consistent meetings for years on Tuesdays and Thursday nights. And then we just added, starting next week, Monday and Wednesday virtual meetings. So we will have a meeting every evening, Monday through Thursday, starting next week. And we will keep those temporary meetings on Monday and Wednesday going for the foreseeable future until things settle down. And if you're interested in those, you do have to sign up for those so that you will receive the information about how to call in. So you will need to go again online on the palgroup.org website, go to Find a Meeting, and then when you click on just Find a Meeting, there's a blue box that's just above where the meetings are listed. And in that box, there's a little line that says Phone In Meeting. If you click on that, it takes you to the sign-up page, and that'll get you going. And so please consider taking advantage of that. I understand that it's not the same as a personal in-person meeting, and certainly it can be difficult because not everyone can speak at the same time, and you can't tell who's wanting to speak because you can't see. But at the same time, it is an opportunity to do that. So please take advantage of that. And before I have a couple of final thoughts, Ron, anything that you want to share just in thinking about this?
Yeah, I think so. One of the thoughts that comes to my mind, something again that my clients and I talk about on a regular basis, is that whole concept that suffering is inevitable, but misery is optional. And I would encourage everybody to, take a minute and really think that through and look at how can I work my way through this, live my life in a time of crisis and stress, and not be miserable. It is possible, absolutely possible. And three things come to mind on that topic for me. The first is perspective. I think gaining a good perspective on things is vitally important. Our outlook towards life at any given moment is the biggest predictor of how we will do. And that taps into issues of faith. It taps into issues of being well educated and understanding exactly what it is that you're dealing with. But having a perspective, it also taps into gratitude. What are we focusing on? What we've lost or what we have? And the second thing that comes to mind is humor and play. Oh my goodness, it's vital. It's important to smile and to laugh. And there's a lot of things I don't like about the internet, but I love all the humor on the internet. And Americans have a real propensity to finding humor during very dark times. And I just think, enjoying that, having a humorous approach to life, being able to play and have fun is vitally important to your mental health and, by the way, your physical health. Your immune system is strengthened when you laugh and when you play. So that's as a doctor, that would be my prescription for everybody. Go laugh, go play. And last, teamwork or community. Even though in some ways community seems to be getting shut down, thanks to this electronic age, digital age, we can stay in contact and we can manage to stay in touch with the people we care about. Start a group text with family members or friends or people in your church, FaceTime with your grandkids, and stay in touch with one another, work as a community, work as a team, so that, when you find out that there's toilet paper available at Safeway tomorrow at a certain time, you share that with people in your community. They will love you for that. Anyway, so, those three things, perspective, humor and play, and teamwork, community, I think are really, really valuable.
Well, Ron, as always, we sure appreciate you being here. And as I reflect back on my journey with our sons, and my wife and I, went through a lot. And of course, we're all going through a lot now. And one of the most important things I learned through all of that was acceptance was the key. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of times I didn't want to accept the reality of the circumstances we were in.
Yep.
And in hindsight, going back to one of the things you said, the perspective is really important, because if I think I can control things I can't, then it's really hard to accept the reality of my situation.
Yep, absolutely.
And if I could get to where I could accept the fact, for example, that my sons are on drugs, if I could accept the fact that, I can't control whether this virus is going to last a month or 6 months or longer. I can't control a lot of things, but there are things I can do.
Yep.
And one of the most important things I learned in all of this was what you had already mentioned, and I'll just reiterate it, and that was gratitude. And on a humorous aspect of it, my wife said, toilet paper's a luxury.
It's not a necessity.
It's not a necessity. And that was one of the kind of funny things that we looked at is that, it is that way. And when I was at the store earlier and they actually had a box that was there, and they looked like they were all empty. The whole row was empty.
Yeah.
And there was a box that was, it was semi-closed, and I walked up to it, and sure enough, there was like 4 containers of toilet paper
you hit
in there.
the jackpot.
So
on
I
that
walked
one.
over and I'm like, I grabbed one and then I grabbed 2.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
before by the time I had 2, somebody else came and grabbed the other 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, I noticed that people were kind of sneaking them in their carts and putting them underneath stuff because all of a sudden it occurred to me that the sign said you could only have 1.
Ah.
And they had limited it to 1.
Yeah.
And there were just 4 packs,
Uh-huh.
And so I sat there and I looked at it and I go, And there was a woman standing there searching through the boxes with her daughter, and I said, "Hey, would you like a thing of toilet paper?"
Sweet, I love
And
that.
she at first she couldn't even believe it, and
Yeah.
then she was like, she took it, and it was like I gave her gold.
I know. Who would have thought?
And who would have thought?
Yeah.
And part of it was realizing that it is a luxury,
Yeah.
and a lot of these problems that we're facing. I know that we can get through them, and I know that we've been through a lot, and people that have addicted loved ones have been through a lot, and they know what it's like to suffer. And so I'm hoping that they will dig down, be able to find that ability to be thankful for what they have, and then to take care of themselves. And that was, if there was one thing I learned in all of this, is that when things start to get really, really difficult, it's time to back up and do something to take care of yourself.
Yep.
And I'll just share this with you as we close. The other day, I came home a few days ago from work, and honestly, it was just like crashing down. The stock market, I think, went down 3,000 points. I mean, I had just was dealing with all these issues with PAL. All these meetings are closing. We had friends calling and saying that their loved ones were out there doing this and that. It was just like one thing after the next. And I was like, okay, I got to take a break. And my granddaughter was over visiting. She's 4.5 now, and she has been a little bit incapacitated. She had to have a little surgery on her foot, and so she's been in a cast for almost 3 months.
Wow.
And not able to really get out and do much. And of course, she's also a heart patient, so she's got a compromised immune system, so they keep her away from everybody. So it's been really hard.
Yeah.
Well, I just decided, you know what, it's time for us to do something. And I took my sanitizing wipes, and I took my granddaughter, and we went over to the park, and there was nobody there.
Yep.
And we wiped off the swing, and she
Had
sat
fun.
on the swing. And I am not exaggerating. I pushed her for 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Wow.
She did not want to get off the swing.
Yeah.
She did not want to stop. And I didn't want to either.
Yeah.
And I really couldn't think of anything else that entire time.
Yeah.
And so
Perfect. It
you know
was
what?
good therapy for both of you.
And it's just a good reminder for me, step back, be grateful for what we have, and continue to realize that there's certain things we can't control.
Yeah.
And so we want to thank you for tuning in today. This is a tough topic, and we went over a lot of different aspects of how to deal with it, but we really hope that it was valuable to you. We will be making it available on video, obviously, perpetually here on, and we'll post it as soon as we're finished today. So thank you so much for tuning in, and again, check in with us for the next one, and we'll try and continue to provide as many topics as we can. And if you have anything in particular you want us to cover, please send us a note at PAL and let us know if there's something that you would like us to talk about in future presentations that we do. So again, thank you so much. And again, thank you, Ron, for coming down, and really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad I could stop by and do this with you today.
Thank you.